questions. Sierra here with the eCommunity. We have Mark and Arif in the background doing all the stuff for us today, per usual. Thanks, guys, for being here. And we have our guest speaker, Michael from Ecologia. Is that how I'm pronouncing it right or no?
Yeah, that's a good one, Ecologia.
Okay. So my college classes that I took a long time ago wanted to make me pronounce it as Ecologia in the Spanish. So I was like, I wonder if I'm doing that right. So
that's good.
We have Michael here. If you guys are listening live with us, please put some audience engagement in there. Questions for him, comments, questions for me, Mark or Reed, they're behind the scenes. And if you're listening to this as a podcast or watching it as replay, thank you for being here. So we'll go ahead and jump in. Michael, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell us about where you're at, and show us what your pictures that you have, and kind of just describe what Ecologia is.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for hosting. My name is Michael Judd. I currently live in Maryland on the east coast of the U.S. In Appalachia, in the Appalachian Mountains. Actually in the Blue Ridge mountain range, which is a beautiful part of the country. I lived 20 years of my adult life living in rural Latin America. Really good fortune to live with indigenous cultures and just very rural cultures. For a big part of my life and learning and focusing always on plants and natural building and just sort of living with and within the ecologies. Down there, mostly tropicals. But being from this part of the world, I've returned. I've been back about 10 years. And I've hybridized my life and my experiences coming from originally from sort of the edge of suburbia and rural America growing up. Also, I grew up some in northern England in very rural areas. And then, grafting that together with living, very rural in Latin America, I now have this life that blends it all. And I think you can see a picture here of our home. This is a circular straw bale home that we built. It took us 4 years to build it, mixed up with life. And all the wood in the house comes from our land. And all of the doors and windows were either sort of reclaimed or hand built as well. The roof is a living roof. So it's soil, compost, and sedums, very drought tolerant plants. You can see the back of it here. It was a labor of love. It is really a piece of art to build. And here's a really cool aerial recently taken. We have a pawpaw festival. I'm happy to talk about that as well, because we're looking at how to bring together the crossroads of culture, ecology, and economy. And of course, festivals that celebrate different types of tree crops, fruits. In this case, the pawpaw, which is basically a tropical fruit that grows in the north, which is pretty phenomenal in itself. But certainly deserves a lot of celebration. And so we have a festival each fall, and we get a lot of people, and someone had a drone, so we got this aerial shot. So we live in the Blue Ridge Mountains, so it's beautiful, lots of wooded areas. In the areas that we have open, we plant food forests. And happy to go into that more as well. It's not growing food in the forest, it's growing food like the forest. So when we're planting fruit trees, nut trees, our gardens, mostly, perennials, then we're designing them as a healthy ecosystem so that they really support themselves. And our house is very much like that too. So the home, well, I jumped ahead. Here's my crazy crew. These are the critters that live in this habitat. It's my wife Ashley and our son Wyatt. And our little
beautiful
big girl.
Family.
Thank you. Yeah, that's Jaya. She's 2. Wyatt's 8. So we got quite the little eco circus going on here. But I guess what I'm getting ready to show here is actually how we built this house. And what's really cool, many cool things about this house, but it's again, it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid of a lot of what I'd learned living in Latin America, doing natural building, learning to literally build with what's in your environment. And here, back in the U.S., it's definitely a different environment, but we do have a lot of woods, and we're also kind of down by a creek. So we wanted to be very mindful of our foundation in sort of a wetter area. So this is the foundation of our house, and it's just packed gravel. It's what's called a rubble trench foundation. And basically it's 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, and it's just packed gravel. On top of that, we built our house. So any water that's moving underground or above ground, when it comes to our house, it actually gets drawn as a drain and out the front. So there's nothing to ever fail in this foundation. It'll be there for thousands of years. The oldest structures on the planet are on stone foundations. So, and this is all coded and permitted. So these things are very realistic in many environments to work with. So I want to share that rubble trench foundation for the foundation of the house. We round wood timber framed the house, which means that we kept all of the trees in their round state, which took a while, for us to put the joinery together. But we really wanted to kind of keep that energy. And all of the wood in the house came from our land, and I'd say 90% of it storm fallen wood. So we really, it was a windfall. That was probably the only easy part. And then there's over 550 straw bales in the house that actually make up the walls. And here you can see we did some workshops. A lot of community was built around building the house. And that energy is still very much, part of our lives and our home.
I see a house in the background. Is that where you guys were residing while it was being built?
That is my folks' home. So great question. We collectively steward about 25 acres here since the 70s. And yeah, when I was ready to come back to living in the U.S., I was looking at options. At the time, my parents, were around 70 years old. So I had to make a decision, did I want to be far or do I want to be near? Mm-hmm. You can see what I chose.
That's great. Being connected to family is always a good thing.
Yeah, I didn't want to be so far as they aged. And I'm grateful. My father transitioned 6 years ago, so about 4 years into to creating our home here. It was his time to move along, and I was grateful that we were here to hold space for that. And we actually created a home cemetery on our land, together, my father and I and our family, in preparation for him and for the rest of us. And so we really practiced full circle in looking at how to hold space for each other. Our children have been born in our homes. Jai was born in this home. Wyatt was born where we were staying while we were building the home. My father died at home, and we sat with him for 3 days and buried him ourselves. So really, and we don't know how to do any of this stuff. We don't have a culture that's given us this. We are just following our hearts, and we have each other to support in doing these things. But I don't want anyone to think that we've got some roadmap. We're just doing it. We're just going for it. There's a picture of how lush the roof is here. It's really quite magical. And
wow.
In the interior, we put a lot of energy and time
into.
That is
very gorgeous. It looks like an Airbnb.
Yeah, it would be quite the Airbnb, yes. And we put a lot of love and art into the house, largely because we want to inspire other people to realize that you can work with natural building, and it can be beautiful, comfortable, very aesthetic. And so we really went the extra mile to really be able to show people that and all of the work that we did in it. And this is how we heat our home. So it's a masonry stove, which is a finished design. Basically, you just fill the chamber, one time, you burn it, burns down, and you shut the whole thing up, and then it slowly just emanates that heat out and heats the whole house in this wonderful type of warmth that literally like just hugs you. And it's just very efficient. One armful of wood a day in the wintertime is all we need to heat the whole house. And the roof keeps the heat out in the summer. Most buildings and offices and homes gain their heat in the summer from their roofs. So the living roof actually helps us very much in keeping the house cool. We also have passive ventilation, meaning we have different tiers of windows. We have a cupola. Cool air comes in low and pulls hot air up. So it's very much like the way that we work with designing our landscapes. We design our homes so that it very much functions for itself. It doesn't need constant inputs. And I think there's a lot of parallels that we can look at with modern architecture and the modern use of our landscapes. They're very energy intensive. They're not super efficient and need constant inputs. And the way that we approach living is less work for more return, and that just comes down to design. And it's really not secret or rocket science design, as we're really kind of just showing by our lifestyle here. And I think
did you design this all on your own, or did you partner up with somebody that helped you like set the blueprints up and all of that?
So we can. Am I on? Can you put me on video? I'm ready to pop back on and see you as I talk to you, if that's an option.
Oh, I can see you in the presentation.
Taking this. Yeah, I'm doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. Happy to take a break from these slides. And so, great question. There you are.
Yeah.
So it's an influence of a lot of my experiences living in Latin America, but then it was also inspired by a natural building structure down North Carolina, down in the Smoky Mountains, the southern part of Appalachia. There's a permaculture design community there called Earth Haven, and you know about Earth Haven?
We've had them on before, yeah.
Great. Very pioneering in many ways. They're sort of one of the first permaculturally designed communities in North America. And I had come back from Latin America and wanted to learn more about natural building, because I'd been doing that in the jungle, basically. And I heard that Earth Haven was building this circular straw bale, 13-sided Mayan designed structure. So I was like, oh, I don't know what permaculture is, but I want to go check out this natural building. And showed up. This was 25 years ago. Showed up and just showed up and started working on what's their council house. It's their community council center. And that is what our house is inspired from. It's very similar, but to kind of tailor it, to kind of make it more of our home, I did work with an architect, and I had a structural engineer stamp it. So that was key. You get a structural engineer to stamp your plans, then you can go a long way with the coding and the permitting. They just want someone else's neck to be on the line. And if someone's willing to do that, then we really had no troubles. We were very well supported. And again, having good plans, having the structural engineer helped. But I think, in our area, they were happy to have something more original to work with. And our house is also a gray water system and a compost toilet. So that means that all of the water from our sinks, our washing machine, our tub, all feeds out by gravity. So there's no mechanisms, which is really cool. And it just gravity feeds out into our landscape, into a trough that has two raised beds on either side of it. And we got pawpaws and, persimmons and currants and, cornucopia of plants in there that our gray water naturally feeds. And then the compost toilet, also very important for that full circle, returning and, keeping the fertility cycle going. So, really pleased that that was all very possible. And so yeah, if the electricity or the systems go down, our house is fine. It's set up. I often talk about designing for neglect, whether it's in your landscape, your gardens, your house, whatever. Design for neglect. And that way, you're covered. Even with best intentions, if things don't go the way you're hoping, then it'll still work.
Yeah, so you guys are pretty much fully functional off-grid then?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
So I hooked us to the grid, and so my perception on energy use or even energy source is more about how much energy you're using. So, solar panels have a huge impact. They're manufacturing the chemicals, the conditions that they're often made in. It's not green. It's not. It's not ecological. Yes, it has a different balance than coal and oil and nuclear. But like, for example, my mother's house is a huge house, and she's got her roof covered in solar panels, but this house takes a ton of energy. So to me, that doesn't really make it green. Our house our house across the creek over there hardly uses any energy at all. So to me, it's all about, what's your energy usage. And I think connecting to the grid for the small amount of energy that we use potentially has a smaller footprint than if we went and got a whole bunch of solar panels and tried to meet that same need. So I come from that perspective of how much you're using versus necessarily where it's coming from. And I think that's an important conversation for people to explore. The concept of these other types of energies just being green and eco-friendly and all that stuff is missing a big part of really what's going on. It just kind of gives us freedom to continue doing what we're doing and feel good about it.
Yeah, I think it takes somebody with a really, open mind or a deep thought process to really think back and, even going back to the manufacturing of the solar panels and be like, are these actually green? Even though they're supposed to be, but are they? You raise a good point there.
Think about the metals, the chemicals, the people that are making those. What are the conditions? Where do all the chemicals from that process go? And I don't want to bash on it. I think with good design, energy efficient design, and then using those types of energies together, could really be the thing that makes the most sense. So I'm not saying it doesn't have its place. I just see generally it being sort of pasted about as the way to save the world, and I wish it was that simple.
Yeah, me too. If that's all that we had to do was just recycle and put some solar panels up, would not be better. So on a financial standpoint, where do you see your house on a scale of like traditional homes? More on like the higher or lower end? Like, would it be more cost efficient to build something like what you've done here, or a traditional model?
That's a good question. Now, our house is a bit of an exception because we really went the extra miles on artistic.
Beautiful. I love that image there on the screen.
We spent a lot more. I mean, I did a lot of the work. I did hire friends, very skilled friends. We had a lot of volunteers. It was a mix. I think all said and done, we were somewhere in the ballpark of $250,000 to build our home. But a friend of mine here in the same area, and it's an affluent area, so things aren't cheap here in any regards. But they built a load-bearing straw bale house. So you can actually build a straw bale house where the bales hold the weight of the roof. And this is also, federally coded in many areas. And I think the more you reduce your carpentry, so to say, and your wood, the less expensive it's going to be. So there are very straightforward designs with straw bale, and they built their house, and it's a lovely house that has everything you could ever want and just feels great. And they built it for $90,000. So I think there's a spectrum, and then of course there's a place up the hill, they built $1 million straw bale house, which I think starts to become ironic, but it's still potentially better than the alternatives. So,
Yeah.
but I think the trade-off is in the labor. Your materials are less expensive, but it takes more time, whether that's your time or you're paying somebody else. So I think a lot of the comparisons, potentially, if you're paying other people to do the labor, it might come out, pretty similar to conventional.
Talking about the straw, or did you say it was straw or hay bales?
Straw bale.
Straw bales. Okay. What is keeping those from decomposing over time? Are they just completely encapsulated and separated from elements?
They are protected, but they're definitely not encapsulated because you want them to be able to breathe, so to say. So the first straw bale machines, I think were made out west, Nebraska, in the 1880s. And as soon as they started baling straw is a byproduct of grain, whether it's rye, wheat, rice. After you take off the grain heads, you've got the stalk. That's what straw is. And so as soon as they started, with making these straw bales, they started building houses, and those houses from the 1880s are still being lived in. So there's not, we don't know how long they can last. The trick is making sure that they're harvested dry and that they're stored dry and that they're always dry, that you don't get an opportunity where moisture gets in there. And so doing that, getting them off the ground and giving them a good roof, what we call good boots and hats in natural building, allows them to not be, in touch with moisture. And then on the outside of our house, we have a lime plaster, traditional lime plaster, which is lime, made into a putty mixed with sand and applied. And if water hits that, it actually sheets off, but it still allows air to migrate out. So you wouldn't want to seal over straw bale with cement or put metal siding on it, because then the moisture would get trapped and then you would have an issue. So literally, straw bales houses, they breathe. The interior of our house is earthen plaster. You could do lime plaster inside as well, but it breathes, and which is awesome because the house has that sort of energy of not necessarily being separate from the elements.
That's very cool. I bet you guys have some beautiful scenery where you're at right now with fall foliage.
It's gorgeous. We're just doing some videoing. We had some drones and some video out here capturing, the fall colors, and a lot of golden hues in our woods. We have a lot of poplar and spice bush, and they're all turning yellow. So, and it just shimmers. It's really beautiful here. Yeah, I love this part of the world. So do a lot of other people. It's getting quite busy.
Is it your tourist time then, where you're at?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. People do come to see the fall colors. But we're only like 40 miles from Washington, D.C.
Okay.
We're only 40 miles from Baltimore. So we're kind of like in a triangle going east from both of those. And we're in a beautiful small city called Frederick, Maryland. And it's growing and has been growing exponentially over the last couple of decades. Somewhat as a bedroom community for those. There's a lot of technology, medical technology here too, and which is interesting. The whole world is growing population wise. Everywhere is changing, but it's fascinating to be here and watching these new edges be created, and we sit literally between the worlds. The woods we live in back into the watershed here and into the mountains. So, to our back is this wonderful, sort of open wilderness. And then to our front immediately is this really fast growing suburbia developments and stuff. So we really live right on the edge, and try to hold that space in who we are and what we're doing. We do a lot of workshops, a lot of education. with our space, and people are eager to come out. It's also a good spot to be economically, for the work that I do. But I'd say only in the last 10 years. 20 years ago, you might have had a hard time making a living, being a more holistic designer. But now the interest is growing, and I've watched that grow, even over the last 10 years. But people are eager to learn, and our site has really helped do that. And I've written a couple of books since I've been here, and really relating to the cultural interests, making things aesthetic as well as very functional, being tuned into, what's important to people, the combinations, how to look through the cultural lens of what people are ready to engage in, and then diversify from there.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about Ecologia, and tell me about when was that founded. I know you're the founder, and kind of what your role is, and a little bit about what you do on the professional end of things.
Sure. So Ecologia, it's actually a Portuguese word for ecology. And when I came back 10 years ago, I had to create my livelihood, and yet do what I do, be who I am. And so I just jumped right in, and I had some good friendships. One of them is Brian Voltaggio. He's one of the top chefs, that are on the Top Chef shows and stuff. Pretty famous guy. But he's from Frederick, and he's got his flagship restaurant at the time was Volt. And he heard I was back, and he said, "Hey man, need your help. Come look at our courtyard." So, I jumped in designing edible landscape, edible courtyard, edible woodland garden, there at his restaurant. And just kind of was able to jump right in. Like I said, the timing was right. The interest was growing, and nobody else was offering it. So, and then I started doing workshops. I just started saying, hey, you want to come learn how to build an herb spiral? You want to learn how to graft? You want to, do some natural building? And I'm very hands-on. I love hands-ons. I'm very how-to. My books are also very how-to. Jump right in. And so that was a great way through the workshops. People coming out. I teamed up with a local co-op. We have a great co-op organic grocery network here, and they already had an audience. So I was like, well, but they hadn't been doing any off-site classes. They were doing presentations and talks at their stores. And I said, well, hey, how about let's do some off-site hands-on stuff at our place? And they were like, great. So, people got to come out, they got hands-ons. They were like, well, hey, do you consult on this? And I'm like, yeah. So it was kind of like it was great because I was able to be paid for every step of the way. I got paid for the workshops, then I got paid to consult. And then oftentimes those consultations turned into installations. So then, so I was kind of covered, and that worked out really well. And I was building up, my community. I got emails every time I did a talk. I've got, over 6,000 personal, handed to me emails at this point. And that's made a big difference, and helped, what I do now, because I've evolved. My business has evolved a lot from those early days where I was doing more install stuff. I was helping people do swales, build earthen ovens, herb spirals, a lot of the things that are in my first book. Edible landscaping with a permaculture twist is really the first 3 years of my work doing Ecologia. And it's broken into how-to chapters, herb spirals, swales on contour, how to do raised beds that passively harvest rainwater, hugelkulture, which is, how do you build mounds, earthen mounds with wood inside of them, uncommon fruits. I'm really all about the plants. I'm a real plant person. And I focus a lot on what grows well, again, with neglect, but is attractive, which is tasty and productive. So, I put all that in my first book. And over the years, I've migrated away from doing more install work and doing more consulting. I'd like to do more education. I'd like to broaden and see, how, who can I reach more rather than just kind of be more private with my practice. So I'm still in that direction. And then I've actually migrated a lot of my focus into nut trees and started a nonprofit a couple years ago called Silvoculture. Silvoculture.org is our site, and it focuses on nut trees and specifically hybrid chestnuts. Chestnuts are very productive, annual bearing, very carbohydrate rich tree crop. So, and they're also very economically viable for people to grow, for farmers to transition annual agriculture into, these tree crops, which then have all these ecological benefits. So again, how do we combine ecology, economy, and culture is a big focus of mine, and I'm working a lot with the nuts and the tree crops, to help bring that all together. So yeah, it just kind of I keep designing my life, I keep designing my work to keep going in the direction that I'm drawn in.
What were some of the challenges that you faced through the years while you were building up this organization, and how did you overcome those, and how did that change what you're doing now?
That's a big question. I've been very successful in as far as Ecologia goes. I've really been met well, and things have worked out really well. I think part of that's having a site that I could operate from as well. Mm-hmm. Having a site where I could, have big piles of wood chips, where I could dump big piles of soil, having a truck, having an extended community that I could pool labor from, more on a contract basis, avoid getting into employees. I really kind of was very organic. I was very grassroots about the way that I operated, making sure that I didn't take on too much overhead that kind of held me down. So I've been able to really mix my work with my life. I think I must have learned that living in Latin America and understanding. Design, when you get into design, and I work a lot with permaculture design, which is very holistic and incorporates aspects of your life, your economy, your landscape, your community. And once you begin to be able to see, life through the designer's eye, so to say, you realize that you can do it yourself in your economy and your ecology. You don't necessarily have to try and fit it into an existing frame. And a lot of people would always say to me, well, yeah, why don't you have employees, or why don't you do maintenance? And I'm like, that doesn't really suit my life or what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people wondered how I could be successful because I wasn't operating as from the norm or what most people know to work. But it's worked. It's worked well for me. Again, I had the support of a place of land. I think that's helpful. But even if I didn't, I would coordinate and lease somewhere that I could stage things from if I needed to. But I think I've always just been careful about not sort of losing my independence and pulling things together and having confidence that I could do that. That doesn't really answer your question too much. I would say the challenges sometimes as any someone who owns their own business, whatever it is having challenge separating myself from it and getting involved in too many projects. Yeah, so I definitely, and I'm a very passionate person, and I get excited about things, and I have a lot of visions. So putting all that together has me sort of jumping at a lot of things and doing a lot of things, and over the years, that's definitely led to some burnout. It's led to distraction. And these are all things that I've been learning from and really, really just now am beginning to be able to let go of and stop pushing and start sort of opening things up to see what comes forth and not necessarily trying to manifest things myself. I think we live in a world and a culture that is accustomed to making things work, manifesting things, and maybe getting addicted to that and excited about it, but ultimately, kind of getting overwhelmed with it and burned out instead of just kind of maybe having the empty bowl and following, more of your spirit, and seeing and having trust and faith in that and sort of letting things come through. And that's where I'm getting to. So I think a lot of my challenge maybe has been to try and do too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, what do you call, is it your clients or your customers? I don't know what terminology you use.
Yeah, it all, none of that sounds right. But client, but every time I say clients, it sounds so cut and dry. Especially with the people that I'm interacting with, a lot of, it's a great community of people. You put out a shingle for what I do, it draws in a lot of good people. But yeah, I'd say clients, for lack of a better term.
Okay. Do you tend to see more clients coming from like individual standpoint or residential or like a commercial, like the project you were talking about with the courtyard and the restaurant?
I would say, especially in the early and majority of the years of Ecologia, it's been more residential.
Okay.
It's been families or, couples or maybe an individual, people that have a couple of acres at the most and really want to just start, growing food. And so I would say that's the majority of it in our area. I've not really been drawn to do things commercially.
Mm-hmm.
That restaurant was, kind of an exception, and it was a smaller space and it was a relationship and it was fun. But I tell you, working in those spaces, public spaces, are hard to work in. As far as, if you create a space, a garden or something, they get hammered. They get hammered. So, I would say mostly residential. Now my interest is going toward, agroforestry, working with larger plantings, nut orchards, diversified orchard systems, working with, projects, nonprofits or for profit, but people who are really sort of going where my interests are. And they're, they're there. A lot of times you just have to explain what you're doing to people and they're like, yeah, that's often what I do is I just get people excited about, what I'm excited about, and give them the understanding. And then they're like, yeah, let's do that. So a lot of times my consultations are just kind of bringing to life what I want to do and what I see. And then people are like, yeah, let's do that. Which is good for me too, because then I'm doing what I'm interested in.
Are these all drawings that you've done on the screen?
These are different drawings. These are related, I would say, largely to some of my more recent projects. These are agroforestry, diversified fruit and nut rich systems. Again, where I'm kind of interested. My website and the stuff that I keep kind of adjusting a little bit to go in the direction that I want. I haven't closed doors necessarily to the things that I have done, but it's not necessarily what I'm really putting out there so much.
Okay. Taking some notes. I want to remember to ask you about your podcast later on, because I think Dr. Wayne Dorband might be interested in coming on as a guest speaker if you ever do anything like that. So. Well,
I haven't launched a podcast. I've danced around it,
okay.
But I haven't gone there yet. I've been hosted on a number of podcasts, and Sustainable World Radio, which I think you just flew by there, is a great podcast. I do recommend listening to Sustainable World Radio. Mm-hmm. Jill Cloutier, who's a wonderful being and host, has done quite a few with me. on edible landscaping. The last one, The Future is Nuts, really talking about nuts and chestnuts. We've done ones on pawpaw, on different fruits. The Permaculture Podcast with Scott Mann is another good podcast that I've done a number of podcasts on. Again, everything from edible landscaping, permaculture to natural burial. So yeah, and on my website, there's quite a few of those podcasts. So I've been a host on quite a few, but I haven't gotten around to hosting my own. I don't know when that's going to happen, not with a 2-year-old in the mix. So
yeah.
Let's see.
So talk a little bit about the community engagement and involvement and your workshops and things such as that.
So yeah, the community things, we're growing those. We're coming up with new ideas. Our Pawpaw Festival is a really popular event that's gone really well. Hold on. Okay. You can go up to Krista. She's up there. Sorry, that's my 8-year-old. Who was not supposed to bother me. Anyway, the Pawpaw Festival is a celebration of the pawpaw fruit, which is the only member of the tropical fruit family, the annona, the custard apple family. And what's awesome and unique about the pawpaw is it migrated, over thousands and thousands of years from, the tropics, subtropics, all the way up into what we call northern, or I should say southern Ontario and Canada. So it's grown all the way up through the cold north of North America, and especially in the east and in the Midwest. And it is a tropical fruit. It's a tropical tree that grows here. The fruit is phenomenal. It is one of the best tropical tasting fruits I've ever had. I've grown many of its family members in the tropics, and I'm a fruit aficionado, explorer all around the world, and I do consider the pawpaw to be one of the best fruits that I've ever had.
I've never tried one.
They're so good. They're so good. They're like custard. They're like a custard consistency with flavors of banana, mango, pineapple. Super sweet, super rich. Now, of course, those are the ones that are select genetics. It's like a wild crab apple's not going to taste like a Golden Delicious.
Yeah.
But pawpaw, there are good select genetics, and that's one of the reasons we have a festival, is so that people can really experience the full potential of this fruit. Cool. And we have to limit the tickets each year at like 500. It sells out. People come, they love it. And even though they're coming for the pawpaw, we have, food forest walks, they have open house to check out our house. We do plant walks, there's great music. There's like local cultural, ecological vendors. And so people are coming and actually experiencing, a different way of living. And that's really what we're after as well. So we're working on doing a barter fair, where people who make their own things, a lot of times they grow it, but as long as you make it, come and trade and build community that way. And then, of course, we do a lot of workshops here. We just did a mushroom workshop where, we teach about how to grow shiitakes and oyster mushrooms on logs, and everyone gets to drill their own log and take their own log home. And of course, we walk around the food forest and talk about all the roles that fungi play in the landscape. Go have tea in the straw bale house. So whenever someone comes, whenever people come here, it's always an experience, and that builds community. Our home built community, and now we're kind of a nucleus for people that are interested in more holistic life. They know about us, they hear about us, they come to our events. We're here, and we're looking to sort of build community but not go too far to where we don't have our own lives. We're not trying to all pile into the same house, so to speak. So that's a balance. How do we build community that suits the modern lifestyle reality, independence, yet really is there to support each other. So yeah, we're exploring all that. It's work in progress.
I got to take it out to one of those pawpaw festivals. That looks awesome. That sounds so fun.
It's a lot of fun. The energy is really high. You know, there's something about the pawpaw that just gets people excited. And the energy when we do the festival, it's just one afternoon. You know, we do it from like 12 to 5, and it just buzzes. You know, it's just such a magical time. Everybody is so happy to be there. There's just this openness, and it just recharges. And I think it just gives us, faith that, that there is a lot of wonderful things that are going on and that we can do together. You know, we need hope with a lot of what's going on. So yeah, please, we'd love to have you.
So Michael, what does a day in the life of you look like? And I'm sure that varies seasonally. So I'd love to hear about, what spring and summer are like versus fall and winter for your workload and kind of what you're doing on the day-to-day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a very eclectic life for sure. So springtime or late winter. So I have a small nursery. I'm just crazy about plants. I get over my head sometimes with all the plants that I have. So I have a small nursery. And so I do a lot of propagation. I like to propagate things that are easy. Again, designed for neglect. I don't have a lot of infrastructure. I find I can do things. I can have a small nursery without, having a greenhouse, without, having a lot of just input material or even labor. So I've really kind of got this permaculture-esque nursery that I start propagating in late winter. I'll start taking cuttings from elderberries, currants, willows. I love willows. I grow lots of willows. And start taking cuttings and start, that's one of my favorite times of year. It's also very busy. So, and of course, at the same time, that's when everyone starts to call me, and all of a sudden, they want a garden. So spring gets a little crazy, and I'm trying to work on that to where, I don't feel a need that I need to be doing other work than my own plant work at that time of year. So spring is very exciting, a lot of energy going on, a lot of plant work, a lot of plant focused, because there's that sweet window for getting especially perennials in the ground. Perennials, anything that lives more than 3 years, your fruit bushes, trees, et cetera, et cetera. There's a couple sweet spots in the year to plant them, a couple windows. So, planting right then in the spring is important. So getting in that window is there's a lot of planting going on. And then May is still busy. It's kind of, but starting to taper down. June, I'm trying to sort of wrap all that up. And the summer, I really try to focus more on being with my family. And, we take off. We try to go down to the coast, go down North Carolina coast. Just go away, go up to, the New York Catskills. And since I work with perennial systems and I've designed my systems for neglect, then I can go away, and most growers can go nowhere in the summertime. So I think this is a big bonus for growing perennials and having a perennial system, is that I actually do get quite a few, months off, and that's important to me. I've opted to not really get into animals for that reason as well. So I got to take care of. And that allows me, but I have friends in community that do animals, so we can trade, or I can barter or buy from them. I don't need to do it all. The whole concept of total self-reliance is I don't know when that's ever existed. We need each other. We need community. We trade. You don't need to do it all yourself. Mm-hmm. Focus on what does well for you and your site. For our site, and what I do, it's fruits and nuts and plants. So that's what I do, and I can trade those for the other things that I need. So anyway, summer, a lot of time off, which is nice. Come back September, it gets busy again with harvests, fruit harvest, pawpaw festival. October is nut harvest. We just had our first annual chestnut roast last weekend. So again, cultural celebration, harvest, planting. So right now is planting time. Again, this is actually the best time to plant perennials. Is October, November in our area, even going into December. So I'm not as busy now. Like September was very busy. October, pretty busy. Now I'm getting more comfortable. I'm growing mushrooms. I'm drilling my logs. I'm doing a lot of oyster shiitakes right now. I'm doing my fall planting. And then December, it's holiday time, family time. And in January, I'm out of here. I usually go to Florida, Hawaii, Puerto Rico. We're doing a permaculture course in Puerto Rico in February. So highly recommend everyone to check that out. So we're going to go down there, stay as a family, you know, try to spend as much time, get away. You know, it's like living where you work. You know, I got to go away. So
Yeah.
all my energy and focus gets on my children and my family. So that's important.
That's awesome.
Then come back March. You know, that's kind of been the cycle so far.
Cool.
All good. All good.
We're having so much fun here. I cannot believe we only have like 10 minutes left in this time slot that we have. So while I'm thinking about it, audience, please ask questions so we can get those answered for you before Michael leaves us here. And I want to give Mark and Arif a chance to ask any questions before I just kind of progress and keep asking anything that I have. So if you guys have anything that you want to talk about with Michael?
Okay, I have like, sure. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead, Mark, please. Yeah.
So for the straw bales themselves, they get plaster on them. On the outside, it's lime plaster. So that's lime made into like a putty mixed with sand and then troweled on, you know, a couple of inches thick. And on the inside, very similar, but with earth, straw, and sand that gets troweled a couple inches thick onto the bales to where they get really well coated, and you can't see the bales. You don't know there's bales in there, and except we have a truth window, which is this cool little window in the wall where you open and you see the straw bale. But we do have some of the interior walls that we have are traditional 2x4 with drywall, like in our kitchen, for example. On an interior wall, we have, so we could hang cabinets and things. You can hang things on straw bale. You could do cabinets on straw bale. You can hang, you know, things into a straw bale. You can do that. But you know, some of our interior walls are straight and drywall, so that we can, you know, easily, you know, basically hang things. But all of our exterior walls are straw bale. So our roof is all the woods from our land in the house, all of it, even our bed, you know, our vanity, I mean, all of it. And we got a portable sawmill on site, and we made for the living roof, which kind of gets heavy. The boards that we made for the decking are 2 to 3 inches thick, and so we built that. And then on top of that, we use rigid insulation, but we got used rigid insulation. There's actually quite a market for used rigid insulation, which I encourage people to look for, because straight up insulation's got a pretty big impact, and there's a lot of stuff to recycle these days. So anyway, got the decking, then we put the rigid insulation on top of that, and then we put a pond liner. Now that's definitely not eco, but we put a rubber liner over all of that so that we could then put the soil and the plants on top of that. That was one of the few things that was manufactured, which makes me, I mean, the whole house, the roof, which people call a green roof, actually had the most, you know, toxic or manufactured materials in it. So, but we did it in a way where we used compost and soil. So usually when you learn about green roofs, they're using perlite, vermiculite, these things that come from afar that are highly processed. And there's nothing green about that stuff by the time it gets onto the roof. And we figured out ways you can just use compost and soil. And we actually have the greenest roof I've ever seen anywhere. So again, you know, you got to question a lot of these things that are just being touted as, you know, the way to do things and that it's green. Yes, there's lots of benefits to having plants on the roof, and I do recommend having living roofs. But explore and be creative and see how maybe that can be done with less environmental impact.
Okay, then my first question will be about the pawpaw fruit. I am from Lahore, Pakistan, and a big fruit here is mango. So when I was looking at it, it's from the same family or like
You
it
know,
looks like
it's
mango to me.
yeah. So it looks like a mango, and it definitely has flavors of mango in it. But it's in the custard apple family, the Annona family, which you likely have growing in Pakistan. If you have mangoes growing, that's
Mhm.
the soursop. The soursop is another member of the Annona family. So I imagine that you're familiar with its relatives, and it's phenomenal. I mean, really, there's nothing like it. There's no other tropical plant that grows in the north. You know, at least not around here. And when you have good genetics that have been selected for, the fruit is exquisite. It really is. It's absolutely one of the best fruits, tropical fruits that you'll ever taste.
We basically we call it the king of mangoes. My second question is that because I know the mango industry here, it's a big industry, and we export it a lot, and it's I think a financial benefit for us. So can you sell do you sell this or you just use it for trade, like what you bring in and what you go?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that the pawpaw is not better known is that it's very perishable. So it doesn't have a shelf life. It bruises easily. It ripens quickly. So unlike the mango, or at least the ones that are being exported, they just don't fit into the global food system very well, which is a good reason to grow them, or find them at at local markets. Now, the one thing that is the saving grace with the pawpaw, as far as it getting out into the world, is that it pulps and freezes really well. So you can pulp it, when it's ripe, and it freezes for 1-2 years really easily. It holds its quality, and that way you could put it in your smoothie every day, or it makes great ice cream. It's so there's ways, and I think we're going to hear more about it. There's been a renaissance with the pawpaw over the last 10 years, certainly in our area of the world, and a lot of orchards have gone in. Maybe not huge orchards, 5-10 acre orchards, but quite a few that are going to start coming online. And so I think we're going to start seeing them show up, probably more likely as like frozen pulp. And so hopefully it'll get your way, or you come visit us at the Pawpaw Festival, and we'll hook you up.
If I will be there, surely come. I will surely come. So my last question is that it's a beautiful house you have, and I think it's a beautiful life you're living, and the kids are enjoying it. But at any point of time in future, you feel like you want to let go and go to city life, and like something like in plans, or you want to stay here and you want your kids to be here. What's the plan there?
That's a good question. I have no interest in living in cities. I have lived in cities. I lived in New York City. I lived in London. So I've lived in cities. I have no interest in living in cities again. I'm not going to say no to anything, but I'm not drawn to do that. I've typically chosen as an adult to live very rural, very rural. This is actually a very populous area for me. Even though we've got 25 acres and we're around the mountains, this is I'm challenged by being around a high populous area, but I can work on that internally. But I don't know. We daydream about being somewhere else, like most people might, and I would like to have other options, as this part of the world might just get too busy, and we don't know what the future brings, but I don't necessarily want to be around a lot of people if things aren't going well. I daydream about the San Juan Islands. Those are up there in Washington State. It's still in the U.S. It's in the group of islands that are just like a John Steinbeck book. They're beautiful. Everyone loves Hawaii. I love Hawaii. I love tropics. But to be honest, I hope that I'm here, and I hope that I stay here, and I hope that I'm happy here. I plan to stay.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, that is our hour. So, Michael, I really thank you for coming on today. I'd even love to have you back, maybe do a course for us on something more specific like agroforestry or even your nut orchards and the stuff that you're moving in the direction towards. So we've kind of covered your history, and I'd like to hear more about where you're going. So you and I can have a conversation about that. But thanks for being here with us today, and I'll just give you a sec or two to say any closing words, and then Arif and Mark will take us out.
Yeah, well, thank you as well. Thanks to the whole team there. I've enjoyed this conversation too. When I do a podcast or I get hosted, it's interesting. What comes out is very much in response to you're talking to, and I've just enjoyed this and felt comfortable, and that's thanks to you all. And yeah, I love that you guys are creating a platform, a frequency for this kind of sharing, learning, connection, and I'm just happy to tune in and be part of it. It's inspiring to me, and we all need to inspire each other and encourage each other. So I'm truly grateful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.